So when I went to Minnesota, everyone keeps telling me how good the bass fishing is. And even the lakes that supposedly don't have bass very many in there, we still caught them, as you can see here, without a whole lot of difficulty, and they're all quality. This particular lake didn't kick out 5-pounders, but it kicked out 2 to 3 pounders in good enough numbers that we had a great time fishing for them. Look at the size of this smallmouth, and he's hooked on the belly, so we got to be real careful with him. There he is right there. That is a toad smallmouth right there, guys. Thick, look how thick he is. Hang on, I'll get him unhooked, Dan. I'll just hold that right there if you would, and we'll get him unhooked, and we'll get it. I'd like to get a still with this one if we could, but you wonder why we throw jerk baits. I got you a reason right here. Let me get him unhooked. And I mean, they get a lot bigger than this one, I'm certain, but that right there's a nice one. The temperature changed dramatically over the 2 different days we were there, a couple days apart no less. The weather conditions in general changed dramatically. The wind got crazy and to the point where we couldn't even film, and then the wind laid back down again, and it was just all over the board. But what never did change the whole time was the fact that the bass would smoke that jerkbait, and that was the only thing they would smoke. And when I say that was the only thing they would smoke, we probably threw 15 different baits between the 3 of us over the course of 2 days. The only bass, or walleyes for that matter, that we caught were on that jerkbait. Once again, dude, there's always a lesson. We always try to find a lesson. Every fish should tell you. We went all the way around this point, got back to the original contour spot with the wind direction and everything. And no, that's not the size we're looking for, but it's the right species and the same presentation, the angle. If you notice now, the wind's blowing off of the structure onto us again, which is a key part of our pattern. And yeah, I bet we mess around, we can find another one bigger than that, but the pattern detail is exactly the same, and that's what's important about the whole thing. So that speaks to the season, I think, a little bit, is the fish weren't really biting well, but they'll pounce a jerkbait pretty good. If they're biting, we could have caught them with a crankbait or maybe a small soft swim bait, but they weren't, and yet they would hit that jerkbait really good. The one thing that did happen was we had to mix retrieves up a little bit. And that really is no shocker. Anytime I'm jerkbait fishing, you're gonna end up mixing up retrieves a lot of the time. The faster we work the bait, the more pike we caught. The mid-speed got us more of the bass, and the slowest ones got us more of the walleyes. So it became pretty easy to almost call your shots. The walleyes were hitting the bait sitting dead still in a little bit deeper water, whereas the bass were hitting the bait higher in the water column with very, very short pauses, and the pikes, you could just straight reel that jerk bait almost. As long as you just kept it moving and bouncing a little bit on the rod tip, just sort of hunted, they'd bite it. But again, they wouldn't bite a crankbait, and there's a lot to be said for that. All right, there we go. I'll just swing him. Yep, I'm just gonna swing him. That's another brown one. So guys, the boat still hasn't moved. And, ooh, this guy's gonna be a handful to deal with right here, guys. So we're gonna be careful with him.
I'm off the fish.
Yep, the boat still has not moved. It still has not been a cast in between. It's 3 in a row. Open your mouth, there we go. So we're headed the right direction. We caught quite a bit bigger than that, but that one's getting better. That's a little thicker, a little heavier. We'll give him good luck. Kiss. And that little stunner in the morning sun, right? That's pretty good looking deal. It's a 20-pound monofilament leader. It's a Trilene XT leader, not fluorocarbon, because I want the bait to stay up higher in the water column, because if I don't keep it up in the water column, it gets down in the weeds more. So I pull it down, pop it a couple times, and slack it out. They're super subtle bites. And you'd almost think the water was real cold, but it's not. It's just under 70 degrees. But for whatever reason, this morning, they're wanting that thing slacked all the way out. And that's the whole retrieve. And every so often it gets bit. So far, it's been bit 3 times in 3 minutes. It looks like we're just out in the open, but we're fishing around pieces of structure. So we're basically trying to keep the boat in a contour line somewhere between 15 and 20 feet deep. But what we're throwing up onto and around is somewhere between about 6 and 12 feet deep. And this stunted jerkbait, the way I'm working it, is only running about 4 feet, 3 to 4 feet. So we're trying to draw fish up and out of the weeds and onto the bait. And so that's the general concept. Now, with a jerk bait, it's all about the drawing power of the bait. It's the jerking that gets their attention, the sudden stop that often gets them to bite, which is why you see the slackline hook sets. The biggest reason I'm throwing the jerk bait, as opposed to, I don't know, any one of other 500 lures in the boat, is because I can stop it and it stays there. If I retrieve a crankbait or anything else, it either floats or sinks when I stop. Topwater bait's on the surface, so you lose the multi-species aspect from that regard. And anything that sinks is down in the weeds almost immediately. So you have to stay above the weed top somehow and draw fish up and out of them. So that's why we've chosen what we did. This morning I'm starting with a gold chrome because of a little bit low light. Once the sun comes up, I'll probably switch it up to a silver chrome. The water's very clear, guys, very clear. There's some tannin in it, but otherwise it's clear and lots of vegetation. So one or two more casts, see if we can get this thing bit right here real quick. I'm throwing on spinning tackle because I'm gonna throw it all day long. I can throw it far in the wind, and I also don't fatigue. The rod's just hanging to my hand, so I can just use my wrist to do all the work. I don't even have to hang on to it, as you can see right here. When I do it with casting gear and fluorocarbon like a lot of guys do, you'll wear yourself out. A lot easier working a jerk bait. You got to jerk it harder if it's on fluorocarbon. The casting rod itself is bigger and heavier, and you've got to hold the rod, whereas this you can just let it hang. When we're talking about fishing, I want to fish spots, and the reason I want to fish spots as opposed to areas is I feel like I can be more precise on everything that I'm doing. So one thing I'm always trying to do is refine my pattern to a spot, a type of specific thing as small as possible, because the better I can do that, the more efficient I always feel like I can be. Tim, on the other hand, and there's no wrong answers in fishing, so this is not a knock on Tim. Tim, on the other hand, likes to just drop the trolling motor and cover a bunch of water. Silver blackback.
We were throwing the gold one earlier, but the sun's come out pretty good now, so decided to go with the chrome one and got one to go. We got on the downwind side of our point, which kind of fits our pattern all morning.
In the case of Minnesota, in this particular lake, that was exactly what it took, is just get on the trolling motor and get across these big giant pieces of structure, big points, and just work your way up and down them, or across big grass flats. They were kind of big sloping, tapering points. By Colorado standards or Western Angler standards, these are very loosely defined points, but by Minnesota, where the depth changes are less dramatic, in my experience, the points are still just that. They are points, but they're large and flat and spread out. And we really just had to keep those jerk baits moving, throwing all around the point, different casting angles. In a lot of the footage, it looks like we're working down a bank, but it's because it's a big, long peninsula sticking out into the lake. So the point really is defined all the way around it. And we caught fish on pretty much all of those that we stopped and visited on.